Welcome to another episode of Warmaster's Workshop. Today we're going to be putting together a wireless voice changer. Now this is a sort of an addition to our episode 13 from Warmaster's Workshop, where we actually built a wired voice changer. This is using many of the same pieces of technology. We've got an Arduino Uno here, and we're using the Adafruit Wave Shield as well. As you can see, I have already pre-wired the Wave Shield, which is wired exactly the same as it is if you go back and watch Warmaster's Workshop episode 13. So we're going to start from here. We're going to talk about the components a little bit and go from there. Under here, I have this is a 2.4 gigahertz wireless microphone system. I bought this off of Amazon for around 30 bucks, maybe just under 30 bucks, but close enough to say 30 bucks. So what this comes with is, this is a receiver unit, 2.4 gigahertz receiver, you can see that on there. This is the transmitter unit, which is the just the microphone. And these units are already pre-charged, so that's a plus, especially for the tutorial. I don't have to worry about charging them. Also, it comes with a charging cable, which is just a little micro USB. It comes with a headband. So the trick with this headband is you may not need the headband in your helmet, but you can always snip off this little piece here. You can snip this little piece off right here. This is the piece that actually hooks to the microphone. So you can put that in there. Let's see, let me see how we can get this thing. There we go. It hooks in just like that. There we are. So you can actually cut this piece off and epoxy that into your helmet. That way you can put the microphone inside your helmet and always have it there. So we're not really going to be using the band for this tutorial. I'm just going to keep it in the box. Alright, so the first thing we want to do is we want to put this, the internal contents of this, we want to put this onto the board here. So the first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to use a little bit of electrical tape, and I'm going to coat the SD card slot. And the reason why I'm doing that is because I don't want to short the receiver out. I don't want to short it out by having it touching a metal surface. So I'm just going to use just a couple small pieces of electrical tape to cover that up. And that way we don't have to though we're not as concerned with blowing something up. Alright, so we've got that SD card area covered. So let's go ahead and open up our receiver. As you can see, it's super small. This receiver is slightly different than the other one that I used. But what we need to do is we need to open it up. So let's see. Oh, yep, this one actually opens pretty easy. Just slip the little knife in there and boom. There we go. That's the inside. I'll hold this up so you can see it. Over here is the antenna. On this side right here, you can see it. And of course you got your power switch. The power is always going to be switched on in this once we've got it hooked up to the Wave Shield. But it comes turned off. So I mean, you can turn it on and you can see it's already charged. It's got a little light there. So what we're going to do first, I'm going to lower the camera down here just a little bit. We're going to take out this board here. So in order to do that, we've got to unscrew. Let me get a precision screwdriver that's big enough here. We've got to unscrew this little. It's just a little tensioner that keeps this plug right here in place, but I don't want it to get in the way. It probably doesn't matter, but I just don't want it to be in the way. The great thing about these little boards is that they come labeled. All of the places we're going to have to solder, believe it or not, already comes labeled, so half of the work is done for you. Of course, I always recommend getting the wave shield soldered together first. So, alright, so the first thing we're going to do here to get this thing out is I'm just going to gently pry it up on one end. There's a little depressed area here, and that's probably where they put it in. And then, as you can see in the back, there's a little tiny battery. That battery is worth salvaging, because you can use that on other projects that are super small. Let's let this thing zoom in here. There we go. Keep it down low so we can get a good focus. So you want to keep this little battery that's back here, because it's definitely good for other projects. And you can see, I don't know if you can see on here, I'm going to hold this up so it's real close. See how that's labeled? Plus, the green is minus. So that's how we know that's our positive speaker line and our negative speaker line. Then we flip the board. And as you can see, the red positive line is marked down there as well, making this super, super simple. So let's go ahead and desolder these. I've already got my soldering iron here. Just going to heat this up. Pull that line out. Take a little bit of that solder with me, because they sure put a lot on there. One thing you also want to do is you want to make sure that's nice and clean. Now let's do the same thing here. We're going to desolder that. There we go. Alright, now I'm going to pull a little bit of this solder away, because I think it's a little more than what we need. First, let's go ahead and pop this side off. So we're taking the ground off. These are easy because these power and ground wires are much thicker, so they just pull right away. And we're just going to set the case to the side because we don't need it. I'm going to use my this is just some copper ribbon, and this is what we use to pull the solder off, pull away extra solder. You just heat it up over the top of the solder, and as you can see, it pulls that extra solder away. So, because we just don't need all that. Alright, so before we start doing our soldering here, I just want to go over one big difference between doing this with the 2.4 gigahertz and the FM, or I think 900 megahertz is what this is. Anyway, it's UHF, a UHF dongle, which is very similar to this. The difference being the antenna and the overall length of the board. So there is a slight difference between these two boards when you're powering them. On this board, which is the FM or the UHF board, okay, I'm going to zoom in here so you can see. The power line, the red line there, is going to 3 volts. 3 volts is what powers this. Alright, so I'm just going to plug my battery in here. And we should see the green light come on. Let me turn my, there we go. So 3 volts actually powers the UHF board. There we go. Whereas on the 2.4 gigahertz board, it's actually it's 5 volts. So it's the 5 volt line. So let me hold this up on the wave shield board. If I can get the camera to focus here, there you go. See, I've got the 5 volt line running out to the receiver board here. So let's go ahead and solder this up. I'm going to do our power first. And I wonder if I might be able to magnify this so that you can see what I'm doing. There we go. That's a little bit helpful. So we're just going to do this power line. So doing the positive now, which is right there. We've left enough solder on this board that we should be able to solder right on there. Alright, so our power line, our positive line is on. So let's move on to our negative line. Of course, these are such small pieces, it's always difficult to get them to stay exactly where you want them to be. I don't want those two lines to be super close, but that should be good enough. So we align my helping hands here. There we go. Actually, I think we might need a little bit more solder on that, so there we go. Move my soldering iron here. There you can see it's nicely soldered there. Get this out of the way and I'll hold it up so you can see. Nicely soldered, it's not touching. Let's go ahead and I'm going to snip this little bit of extra line right here. Just because it's never good to have extra line hanging about. I'm going to go ahead and... Nope, I think my hot glue is off. Well, we'll come back to that. So let's go ahead and solder our speaker cables here, or our audio input cable, and the ground for that as well. So we just flip this. And let's bring the helping hands back so you can see this. There you go. So this side here is plus. See the little plus? Little plus symbol there. So that's plus. Side's minus. So the plus is the green. And again, half of the fun, getting it to stay where we want it. Alright, so alright, that should be good there. Remove the clip. I'm going to check this just to make sure. We got a little bit of extra line here. I'm just going to snip that off, move this out of the way. Because we don't want to short anything out. There we go. I'll hold this up so you can see that. Nothing shorted out. Really close. Those are some super, super small components. So this is not easy to do. So I would really make sure you have a steady hand before doing this. I always found the hard parts to be just making sure that you're on the solder. It's different when a board comes completely unsoldered. When the board has some solder on it, you want to try to use it. It's important that you use the solder. Whoop. We just have to secure it well enough to solder it. I think that should be good to go. Alright. We already have this a little bit of solder on this line, so we just want to heat it up. There we go. Alright. Now we need to cut our extra. A little bit of cable here that's going, a little bit of wire that's extra. I like to keep those joints as nice as possible. It's very important that you keep clean joints on your electronics. Alright, so I'm just going to hit it. Move this. I'm just going to hit these with some hot glue. Maybe if I can get the hot glue to come out. There we go. You just want to make sure you don't have any exposed wire or anything like that. Here you want to make sure these don't short out, especially if you're using a lithium-ion battery. Super important that all this be very well covered. There's no such thing as too much hot glue when electronic parts or electronic connections are concerned. Alright, so let's go ahead and plug this up and see where we're at. So that's plugged into our Arduino. Move some of this stuff out of the way, clean our work surface up a bit. Now, we're going to test this by plugging in the battery. Oh, look at that. Look at that. That's perfect. That's what we want. We've got our Arduino LED, which you can see in there. And we've got our power LED blinking, and it's actually blinking for sync. So let's turn on our... Oh, we turned on our boom mic here, and look at that. The light's solid. I'm going to go ahead and raise this up a bit. Alright, so let's go ahead and plug our voice changer into a speaker. So I've got this. This is a little, really small, cheap, sort of Bluetooth and accessory speaker. So I'm going to plug that in right here. And this is a very cheap speaker. These will be, it'll work a lot better when you're on a larger speaker with, or maybe not so much larger, but that has more watts. You want a speaker that's got, you need something that's got at least 5 watts for a voice amp like this. I think these speakers maybe have like 2, maybe 3 at the most. So I'm going to go ahead, I went ahead and cut this on. You can see the light there. That's why this light will come on and stay on when we plug in our battery, which we're going to do right now. There's the light. See, this one went solid automatically. So let's try this and see what we've got.
Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3.
Alright, so I'll tell you what, we can try a different speaker too. Let's try, this is a little army speaker. So let's try it and see what happens. Still hear a little feedback, so we may have a loose connection here, but test, 1, 2, 3. Test.
Test, 1, 2, 3. Test.
So let me turn this thing, the dial on this so we can change the pitch. Then we hit the reset button right here. I'm gonna plug it back into this one. Test. Test. 1, 2, 3. Test. We're gonna turn the potentiometer a bit more. Test.
Test.
So you can hear the pitch actually going down.
Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3. Test.
Alright, so just to contrast this one with the UHF one that I made, I'm going to pull this off here. I'm going to plug the UHF one in. Plug this in. Now again, I could have there could be a loose connection on here. I'm going to have to go back and check. But this one is wired the same way. The only difference being, like I said before, that 3 volts powers the UHF versus 5 volts for the 2.4 gigahertz. So let's plug this in. I'm going to turn on the speaker here, or the boom mic. Test. Test. 1, 2, 3.
Test. 1, 2, 3. Test. Test. 1, 2, 3.
So we can turn down the potentiometer on this one. Then we hit reset again. You always have to hit reset if you change the potentiometer setting.
Test. 1, 2, 3. Test. 1, 2, 3. Test. 1, 2, 3. Test. Test. 1, 2, 3. Test.
And then we can gonna go back the opposite way. Hit reset again. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. Test 1, 2, 3. So you can see there we we made it quite a bit higher pitch. So let's turn it down a little bit. 6 turns there. I'm gonna hit reset. Test.
Test. Test. 1, 2, 3. Test. Test. What if he doesn't survive? He's worth a lot to me. Yeah, I'd say that's pretty good. I'd say that sounds pretty good. I took the sponge guard off of the microphone, and it's quite a bit louder. This microphone is directional, so yeah. Anyway, you get the picture.
So one more time, let's switch over to the 2.4 gigahertz. Just going to undo these. Oop. Without killing my plug here. There we go. Test, test, test. I'm going to pull this sponge off of here. Test, test. That's a bit better.
Test, test. 1, 2, 3. I still hear the interference.
And this one just doesn't come through quite as well. And I will say that's one of the things about the 2.4 gigahertz versus VHF or UHF is that it does come over the UHF one actually is more clear. And that is, if you read the reviews on some of these headsets, you'll see that too, where they say, "Hey, this is the UHF is so much more clear." So let's hit our reset button.
Test, test, 1, 2, 3. Test, 1, 2, 3. Test, test, 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, that's a bit better. I'm gonna have to go through, like I said before, and check all my connections and make sure I've not gotten any weird connections here, because there shouldn't be a hum. So some of the key features of this is that you can turn it off and on. Right here, you can turn it off and on with this. That's also the volume. So there is a very small amplifier built into here. There's no amplifier built into this. There is a little bit of volume. You can go up a little bit on the volume. Test, test, test. 1, 2, 3. Test, test.
Test, test, 1, 2, 3.
So you can do the volume a little bit. You can play with the volume a bit on the boom. Here's we'll fade it down a bit.
Test, 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 1, 2, 3. Test.
So yeah, you can play with that volume to get it the way you want it. But personally, I really like the UHF. I believe it's UHF or VHF. Anyway, I'll call it FM because that's what it is. I really like the FM one better than the wireless, the 2.4 gigahertz. Part of that reason is because it is powered with the 3 volts. And that makes a big difference because that means your battery is going to last longer than this powered by the 5 volts. It's going to blow through your battery a lot quicker. The drawback is that there's always a chance that you might that your channel is the same as someone else's. So you might actually pick up someone else's transmitter and they're talking through you. So that's the drawback here. The drawback on this one is that it's just not quite as clear and it pulls more power. So, I mean, it's really a toss-up. But the main thing is that, this is something you can do yourself. It's not super difficult to do. It is fairly advanced. You can't just be I wouldn't say just start out as this being your first electronics project. Maybe do some fans or, something of that nature first. Go watch episode 13. It shows you how to build the actual wave shield itself. You need to know that to get to the episode that we're at today. And that's also a great way to learn about soldering is, that episode 13. So this month's project, if you break down the parts cost, it runs right around $60, and that doesn't count the microphone. The Arduino and the wave shield and the transmitter, microphone, and receiver piece, all that together was right around $60 shipped. The most expensive pieces are obviously the transmitter receiver kit and then the wave shield. This was almost $30. The wave shield was over $20, and then of course the Arduino was I want to say I got it for around $8. So maybe not quite 60 by the time you pay the shipping and all that, at right around 60. And then if you get a good, if you're looking for a good microphone or a good speaker, you're going to drop easily $20 on a good speaker. So by the time you add all that in, you're going to be close to $80. So just keep that in mind. This isn't the cheapest project to do, but the benefits, in my opinion, the rewards are great. There really is nowhere where you can buy a wireless voice changer. So being able to build your own is it's a great skill to have, and you can always do this for others and sell it. I don't know of anybody that actually makes these things out there and sells them in the hobby market or the costume market. So it's just something to think about. Anyway, so in conclusion, I hope that you've enjoyed this month's tutorial, and I hope that you've learned something. I'm sure that you have. I'm sure that everybody wants to go run out right now and build their own wireless voice changer. But if you enjoy these tutorials, please consider supporting them on Patreon. You can see the link there in the bottom right-hand corner. And also, always give us a visit at the Mandalorian Mercs Costume Club website at mandalorianmercs.org. And until next time, keep trooping.